Foxy and the curtain that never opened again. There is a corner of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that no child is allowed to visit anymore. It sits behind a purple curtain decorated with glittering stars, the kind of detail that was meant to suggest wonder and excitement, the promise of something worth waiting for. A small sign hangs in front of it, shaped like a starburst, cheerful in the way that only amusement park signage manages to be. But the message printed on it is not cheerful at all. Sorry, out of order. Behind that curtain is Foxy the pirate. He does not come out during the day. The curtain stays drawn. Children who visit the restaurant walk past without looking twice, because Fazbear Entertainment has made it clear that this attraction is no longer running. Management has redirected the foot traffic. The sign does its job. But at night, when the doors close and the camera system flickers on, something stirs behind that fabric. A single eye catches the light at the edge of the curtain. A rusted hook gleams for just a moment. And then, if the person watching does not pay close enough attention, everything goes still. Foxy is one of the original 4 animatronics built for the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. He is possessed, like the other 3, by the soul of a murdered child. The child's name is Fritz, a fact pieced together from the alignment of animatronic heads and names on grave markers in the Lawkeeper ending of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, cross-referenced with how the FNAF 3 Good Ending organizes those same heads. Fritz is the spirit inside the tattered fox suit, the little boy whose story ended in a back room somewhere, and whose presence now hurtles through the West Hall corridor at full speed, at night, when no one is looking. But Foxy's story before the haunting, before Fritz, is where the mystery really starts. The Foxy Go, Go, Go minigame in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 shows him as he was supposed to be. He charges out of Pirate Cove to a crowd of children who are absolutely delighted by him. His fur is tattered, yes, and the hook is already part of his costume design, but there is nothing threatening about the moment. It is a performance. Foxy bursts forward, the children cheer, and the scene reads as exactly the kind of low-budget but earnest entertainment that Fazbear establishments were always going for. He was a crowd favorite. His cove was a separate stage entirely, which already made him something special. The other 3 performed together on the main stage, but Foxy had his own dedicated space. Pirate Cove was built for him alone. The minigame plays 3 times in total. The first 2 runs follow the same pattern. Foxy appears, children are happy, nothing is wrong. The third run is different in a way that stops the breath. When Foxy charges out the final time, the children are already dead, grey and still, exactly the way the murdered children always appear in FNAF's minigame language. William Afton stands near the curtain, that signature purple silhouette, that wide and terrible smile. He is simply there, positioned near the entrance to Pirate Cove, watching. The game does not explain what that means. It simply presents it. Whether William used the spectacle of Foxy's performance to create cover for his movements, or whether Pirate Cove was a location he had already been using for access to isolated children, or whether something else entirely connects those 2 images, the charming fox and the purple figure standing too close to the curtain, the game leaves the interpretation open. What it does not leave open is the result. After that image, the out-of-order sign goes up, and it never comes down. The reason for Foxy's decommissioning is never explicitly stated in the first game. Phone Guy mentions, in his Night 1 call, that the animatronics were allowed to walk around freely during the day, but that this changed at some point after a certain incident. He frames it with characteristic awkwardness, as though he is trying to be informative without being alarming. The incident he is circling around is the bite of 1987, the event that eventually caused Fazbear Entertainment to restrict the animatronics to nighttime free roaming only, under the reasoning that they could not be controlled around customers during daylight hours anymore. For years, the community assumed Foxy caused the bite of 1987. The logic felt solid. His teeth are the sharpest of the original 4 animatronics, a design choice that makes him stand apart from Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, who all have more generic rounded mouths. His lower jaw hangs loose, endoskeleton exposed. He is built for speed in a way the others are not, and he was already out of order, which suggested something had gone wrong with him specifically, something serious enough to pull him from the roster entirely. But later evidence pulled that theory apart. In the timeline of FNAF 2, Foxy has already been replaced. He exists in the parts and service room as a withered, damaged version of himself, stored away while a newer model, Mangle, takes the interactive animatronic role. Mangle is introduced as a rebuild of Foxy, a take-apart and put-back-together attraction for the Kids Cove area. The fact that Foxy was already stored in the back room of the FNAF 2 location suggests that whatever caused his out-of-order status happened before the events of that game. And FNAF 2 is set in 1987, the same year as the bite. So if Foxy was already decommissioned before 1987, he could not have caused the bite of 1987. The interactive novel The Week Before, released in 2024, introduces a detail that has shifted the community's reading further. A character named Ralph hears the Night 5 phone call from FNAF 2 and notices that the recording had been edited, specifically that the part about Jeremy Fitzgerald being moved to the day shift had been cut. The implication is that something happened to Jeremy on the day shift. There are also references within The Week Before to rumors that the animatronic responsible for the bite could be slowed down by bright lights, which aligns more naturally with Mangle, a ceiling-crawling, spider-like animatronic who approaches from above, than with the ground-level Foxy. If Jeremy Fitzgerald was bitten during his first day shift by Mangle, or by one of the animatronics operating during that daytime period, then the bite of 1987 has nothing to do with Foxy at all, which returns the question to what actually put Foxy behind the curtain. The Foxy Go, Go, Go minigame is the only real evidence. William Afton was near Pirate Cove during a performance. Children died. The stage closed. The soul of Fritz moved into the suit and has been there ever since, aware, restless, and deeply strange in the way he responds to observation. Foxy's gameplay mechanic in the original FNAF 1 is the inverse of the other animatronics. Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica are made worse by being watched. Checking the cameras too frequently accelerates their movements. Foxy is made worse by not being watched. If Pirate Cove goes unchecked for too long, he builds through a sequence of stages, peaking at the curtain's edge, standing just outside it, and then gone, sprinting full speed down the West Hall with an urgency that feels almost desperate, as though he has been waiting for exactly this moment of inattention. The community has read this as lore intentional. Fritz, the child inside Foxy, was killed in a moment when no one was watching. The adults around Pirate Cove that night were focused on the performance, on the entertainment, on anything except what was happening in the shadows nearby. The soul carrying that trauma now acts it out in perpetuity, becoming dangerous precisely when he is forgotten. There is something deeply unsettling in that detail when you sit with it long enough. The out of order sign reads like an ending. It reads like the thing Fazbear Entertainment put up to close a chapter they did not want to explain. A terse apology, some decorative stars, and a curtain that came down and stayed down. Whatever happened at Pirate Cove, whatever William Afton was doing near that stage, whatever connection it had to the deaths of children, the company's response was to cover it, to signal that the attraction was no longer available without ever saying why. Fritz is still there, still peeking through the curtain in the dead hours of the night, still measuring the inattention of whoever is sitting in the office down the hall, still building toward that sprint that ends with fists against a metal door. The stage is closed, the show is over, and yet the performer never left. The puppet and the rain. It is raining the night Charlotte Emily dies. The security puppet minigame in Nige in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator tells the story in fragments, the way FNAF has always told the things it wants you to feel, rather than simply understand. You see the outside of the restaurant, a small building, modest, the kind of place that looks warmly lit from the outside and makes you think of birthday parties and mediocre pizza and kids who will talk about this place for weeks afterward. You see Charlotte sitting outside of it, alone, waiting for someone who should have been there. The puppet is inside. There is a small gift box keeping the lid weighted shut, trapping the animatronic before it can do the one thing it was designed to do. The puppet was built by Henry Emily, Charlotte's father. He was a gifted engineer who co-founded Fazbear Entertainment alongside William Afton, a man who, at some point before this night, had already given Henry reason to fear for his daughter's safety. Charlotte wears a green bracelet, placed on her wrist so that the puppet sensor would recognize her and follow her, protect her, be drawn to her above all other children in a crowded pizzeria. But on this night, Charlotte is outside the building. The sensor works as intended, and the puppet strains against its own containment. The small box holds it in place. The rain begins. William Afton arrives. The game does not show what happens in detail. It does not need to. Charlotte is alive, and then she is grey, the colour of the dead in FNAF's visual language, a soft, ashen figure collapsing into stillness. William gets back into his car and drives away. The Take Cake to the Children minigame in FNAF 2, seen from a different angle, shows the same event. A purple car stopping near a child who starts crying and then becomes grey, and then a sudden jump scare from the puppet. The first signal that the animatronic story is now irrevocably tied to Charlotte's. The puppet finally breaks free from its box. It moves through the rain toward the burned street where Charlotte died, sustained by the urgency of a programming directive that has already failed. It finds her. It collapses beside her, holding her the way the game quietly implies the censor always meant it to. Drawn to her even in death, short-circuiting in the puddles as it makes contact with the rain, and Charlotte's soul passes into it. In FNAF 2, the puppet is kept inside a large prize box in a room called the prize corner. The player's only method of dealing with it is to keep a music box wound. There is no flash, no door, no camera trick that works on the puppet. You simply have to keep the music playing, or it comes. Unlike every other animatronic in the game, the puppet does not respond to the Freddy Fazbear head. The mask players use to confuse the toy animatronics into standing down. Phone Guy notes explicitly that the puppet is always thinking. It is aware in a way the others are not. This lines up with what the Pizzeria Simulator completion ending later reveals through Henry Emily's speech. Charlotte was William's first victim. She was the first soul to possess an animatronic. And after she did, something remarkable happened. She took it upon herself to give the other murdered children something too. The Give Gifts, Give Life minigame in FNAF 2 shows the puppet distributing gifts to small figures representing the children who would become the missing children. This is widely read as the puppet giving those children the ability to possess the animatronics waiting for them, extending life, or some shadow of it, to the souls trapped in the building. The puppet became a kind of guardian, a protector who was too late to save anyone in life, but who found a way to be useful in death. This is confirmed more explicitly in Ultimate Custom Night, which gives the puppet a voice for the first time. She speaks, and in speaking, Charlotte becomes a fully realized character rather than a symbol. She expresses awareness. She comments on others. She holds on to something that the other souls seem to have let go of, where the other animatronics rage and hunger and lash out without much apparent consciousness behind the action. Charlotte is deliberate. She has intent. The mystery of the puppet is not whether Charlotte is inside her. That much has been confirmed through the completion ending, through the character encyclopedia, through Henry's closing speech. The mystery is about the gaps. Charlotte's death predates the missing children incident. She died first. She possessed the puppet first. And then the puppet, operating from inside a gift box in the prize corner of a rebuilt Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, watched the other children arrive one by one and found ways to give them something. This means Charlotte was present for the entirety of the haunting. She was there when Gabriel's soul moved into Freddy. She was there when Fritz found his way into Foxy. She watched Jeremy become Bonnie, Susie become Chica, Cassidy become Golden Freddy. The question the game never answers is what that was like. Charlotte understood what was happening to them. Her father built her as someone careful and thoughtful. Henry Emily is described repeatedly as a man who built things with love, who felt deeply, who was ultimately destroyed by the weight of what he had allowed to happen. His daughter, if the novels and the games align the way fans believe, carried similar qualities into whatever she became inside that machine. She knew what those children had lost. She had lost it first. The puppet's gameplay presence is one of relentless, quiet inevitability. The music box mechanic in FNAF 2 is unlike anything else in the series up to that point. You are not defending against the puppet. You are delaying it. The music is the only thing standing between you and a visit from something that is already decided on coming. It is just a question of when. The moment you forget. The moment your attention goes to the other animatronics pressing in from the hallways, the music stops. And then the prize corner camera shows the box opening. The image of the puppet rising from that box, its long fingers curling over the lid, its white mask tilted slightly, has become one of the most recognizable images in the entire franchise. It does not rush. It does not scramble. It simply emerges with the calm confidence of something that has been waiting a very long time and has finally been given permission to move. What the game never resolves is whether Charlotte feels any of this the way a person would feel it, whether the experience of being inside the puppet, of watching Fazbear Entertainment rebuild around you, of witnessing more children arrive and more children die, of giving out gifts that are really a different kind of loss, whether any of that accumulated into something like grief. She is described as always thinking. She is more aware than the others. But awareness and understanding are different things, and the game stops short of asking whether Charlotte ever found peace inside the machine her father built. The closest the franchise comes to answering this is in the completion ending of Pizzeria Simulator. When Henry speaks to her directly, he calls her his daughter. He acknowledges what she became and what she did. He says that it was in her nature to protect others and that she does not belong in the place she has been kept. He sets fire to the building. Charlotte is finally released. But even that resolution raises a question the game does not sit with. In the Happy Day minigame of FNAF 3, Charlotte helps the last child, Cassidy, the one with the golden mask, achieve peace before she herself departs. She does this last thing before going. She cannot leave without making sure everyone else is taken care of. Whether that is programming residue from the security puppet's original directive, or whether it is Charlotte Emily choosing to be the person she was before William Afton stopped on a rainy street, the game leaves entirely up to you. Henry Emily and the weight of everything. There is a recording that plays at the end of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. A voice speaks while fire spreads. It says things that the game has been building toward for 4 entries and several years, and it says them calmly, the way people speak when they have accepted something terrible a long time ago and are simply reading the conclusion aloud. The voice belongs to Henry Emily. He is the co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment. He built the first animatronics. He designed the springlock suits. His daughter was the first person William Afton killed. Henry Emily is one of the most important figures in the entire history of FNAF lore. And yet, for most of the franchise's existence, he was almost entirely invisible. He is first referenced indirectly in FNAF 2. Phone Guy mentions that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was originally opened under different ownership, that there had been a previous location with different management, and that those original owners had been missing for some time. The company doing the referencing is, in the FNAF 2 timeline, already distant from whoever built the first machines. Henry's absence is established as a fact early, before the player even knows there is a Henry to account for. His name is first strongly hinted at in the Insanity ending of Pizzeria Simulator. An audio tape plays in an empty office, labeled HRY223. The abbreviation doing just enough to suggest the connection without confirming it outright. It was P.J. Haywood, the voice actor behind William Afton throughout the series, who eventually confirmed during an interview that the cassette man heard in Pizzeria Simulator is indeed Henry Emily. The confirmation came in an unusual way, apparently without Scott Cawthon's direct authorization, but it aligned with everything the law was already pointing toward, and has since been widely accepted. Henry, in the audio records available through the Insanity ending, speaks about what he helped create and what that creation became. He was the engineer, the builder. William handled the business side, the finances, the expansion, the public-facing persona of Fazbear Entertainment. Henry made things work. He invented the springlock mechanism, the hybrid technology that allowed the suits to function as both wearable costumes and autonomous animatronics. He was proud of that invention once, before he understood what William was going to use it for, what Henry carries through the entirety of the lore. Even when he is not present, even when the story forgets to mention him for long stretches, is guilt. Not the guilt of someone who did wrong things directly, but the much harder kind. The guilt of someone who enabled them. Henry built machines that William Afton wore to lure and murder children. The springlock suits that became instruments of death were Henry's design. The first victims died inside or near mechanisms that Henry created with the intention of entertainment. His daughter died because William Afton was his business partner, and Henry trusted that partnership. In the Insanity ending, Henry mentions that he considered suicide. He kept himself alive only because he felt that stopping was not an option. that the story could not end with William Afton still operating and Henry already gone. He spent years reconstructing what had happened. He recovered blueprints for the scooper, the machine William had installed at the sister location facility. He acquired knowledge of Remnant. He built a device called Lefty, a robotic animatronic specifically designed to capture his daughter's soul and bring it to him one last time. He spent years preparing a single night that would end everything. That night is the events of Pizzeria Simulator. The setup is elaborate and patient in the way that only someone who has been sitting with a plan for a very long time can be. Henry opens a new restaurant, not because he wants to run a restaurant, but because the remaining possessed animatronics will inevitably be drawn to it. Scrap Baby, the remnant of his daughter's killer's daughter. Molten Freddy, the amalgamation of surviving spirits. Springtrap, William Afton himself, still somehow alive inside the deteriorated Spring Bonnie suit. Lefty, carrying Charlotte. Henry sets a trap using the thing William has always exploited, the promise of a place where the haunting can continue. He recruits Michael Afton, William's own son, who has been tracking his father across multiple game entries, as the night guard who keeps the animatronics engaged. The restaurant is a funnel, and Michael is the one who keeps everything in motion long enough for Henry to complete the trap. When the final night ends, Henry speaks over the intercom while the building burns. The speech is the most emotionally direct thing in the entirety of the FNAF franchise. He addresses each of the spirits by proxy. He tells his daughter that she does not belong in the place she has been kept. He tells Michael that there was a way out, but he knew Michael would not take it. Henry burns the building down himself. He dies in the fire. The mystery of Henry is not what he did. The mystery is what he knew and when. The community has debated for years at what point Henry became aware of William's crimes. The most generous reading is that Henry spent the early years of the partnership genuinely unaware, and only began to understand after his daughter died. The harder reading, which the law somewhat supports, is that Henry may have had suspicions earlier and told himself they were not real. William was his friend. They had built something together. The friendship and the shared dream of what Fazbear Entertainment could become may have done what those things always do, made the evidence harder to look at directly. The question of Charlotte's murder is particularly sharp in this context. She was killed outside of Freddy Fazbear's pizza location. She was outside because she had been locked out. A detail from the security puppet minigame. On the night his daughter died, Henry's business partner found her alone in the rain and chose to kill her. The relationship between William and Henry after that moment is never fully explored in the games. Whether Henry knew immediately that William was responsible is unclear. Whether the investigation that followed resulted in William facing any consequences within the company is unclear. What is clear is that Henry eventually built a device specifically to collect his daughter's soul from the machine she had been inhabiting for years, and that he ended his life in a fire designed to simultaneously free those souls and kill the man who took everything from him. There is also the subtle question of what Henry's legacy means for the franchise going forward. He appears to be dead. He is referenced in Security Breach through a room that some theorists associate with the preparation for the Pizzeria Simulator fire. He has no confirmed presence in any post-FNAF 6 content, and yet the story of Fazbear Entertainment keeps generating new horrors, new facilities, new management, new animatronics haunted by new souls. The world Henry spent years trying to end has simply continued without him. The tragedy of Henry Emily is quiet and cumulative. He is not a dramatic figure. He does not monologue or make speeches throughout the game series the way villains do. He is simply a man who built beautiful things that were used for terrible purposes, who lost the person he loved most because of a trust he should have questioned, and who spent the rest of his life engineering a single act of closure that was, depending on your reading, either a profound sacrifice or the last plan of someone who had run out of other options. He says before the fire that he will not be joining William in hell because William will have the place all to himself. The line reads like dark humor on the surface. Underneath it is something sadder. The suggestion that Henry expects nothing from what comes after, just the end of something that should have ended sooner. 5 names, 5 graves. They have names. That detail is easy to lose in a franchise that moves this fast, in a story that keeps expanding and reshaping itself around new mechanics and new locations. But at the center of Five Nights at Freddy's, sitting beneath every haunted animatronic and every locked room and everything that moves in the dark, there are 5 children whose names are Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy. They were murdered at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in 1985. William Afton, dressed as Spring Bonnie, the yellow rabbit mascot suit he helped design, and used that costume's recognizability to gain their trust one at a time. He lured them to the safe room at the back of the restaurant. He killed them. Their bodies were hidden inside the animatronic suits, which explains the odor complaints, the stains, the reports of something organic visible through the eye sockets that management consistently failed to address. Charlotte Emily, already inside the puppet, gave those children a way to remain. She distributed what the FNAF lore calls life, not real life, not the life they had before, but something that let their souls persist and inhabit the machines waiting for them. Gabriel went into Freddy, Jeremy went into Bonnie, Susie went into Chica, Fritz went into Foxy, Cassidy went into Golden Freddy, and then they stayed there for years. The names were not confirmed in the games themselves for a long time. The community worked them out gradually, through the Lawkeeper ending of Pizzeria Simulator, where completing a gauntlet of puzzles arranges the animatronic heads in a specific formation and tombstones appear, each one labeled with a name. The positions of the heads match the positions from the endings of FNAF 3, allowing players to cross-reference which soul belongs to which suit. The name Cassidy, belonging to the 5th grave with the partially obscured stone, was the last to be worked out, and required solving codes embedded in the FNAF survival logbook to surface at all. What the game never tells you is anything about these children before they were taken. The Fruity Maze minigame in Pizzeria Simulator tells one fragment of Susie's story. She is a girl playing an arcade game. The screen fills with fruit and color, soft and simple. The kind of casual engagement that is easy to imagine in a pizza restaurant's entertainment area. As she plays, her score reveals an image. A dog. A specific dog that seems to matter to her. William Afton appears, dressed as Spring Bonnie, and tells her that her dog is not dead, that he knows where the dog is, that he can show her. Susie follows him. The game does not show what happens next. It does not need to. The minigame communicates everything through its mechanics and its imagery. The trust of a child who has been grieving something small and private, and the specific cruelty of a man who identified that grief and used it as a door. The help-wanted pizza party level gives a fragment of Gabriel's story. The player takes on the perspective of Gabriel at a birthday celebration, and William, as Glitchtrap in the VR game, mimicking the actions from the original incident, approaches as the Yellow Rabbit and invites Gabriel to a party in the back. The level is framed as a VR recreation of events from the original murders, which means someone at some point reconstructed the circumstances of Gabriel's death well enough to simulate them. Gabriel's death was a birthday. He was celebrating something. William found him there and invited him further in. The others leave even less behind. Jeremy and Fritz appear in the Happiest Day minigame of FNAF 3 as small figures receiving cake from the other children, a moment that functions as a farewell more than a backstory. They are there, and then they are at peace, and then they are gone. The specifics of how they were lured, what they were told, what they believed in the last moments before the safe room, are never surfaced. The mystery in all of this is not the mechanism of the haunting that has been explained through Remnant and possession and Charlotte's intervention. The mystery is what these 5 children were as people and what it meant to be them inside those suits for almost a decade. The animatronics behave with blind hostility toward anyone wearing a security guard uniform. Phone Guy explains this in the early nights of FNAF 2. The new toy animatronics have facial recognition tied to a criminal database, and the older ones seem to have retained some version of this behavior through the violence of their own history. They attack night guards because William Afton used the role of a security guard to gain access. The suits see the uniform, and they react with the accumulated rage of children who were once tricked by someone in exactly that position. This is one of the most specific pieces of characterization in the entire franchise. The 5 souls are not attacking at random. They are reacting to something. They are carrying a specific memory about what a person in that role means, and they are acting on it every night against every guard, regardless of whether the actual guard in the chair has anything to do with what was done to them. The Happiest Day minigame in FNAF 3 is where the question of their final state gets its closest answer. Shadow Freddy, that dark and enigmatic figure, appears in the back rooms of the FNAF 3 location and leads the animatronics, one at a time, to a room where a table is set. Children in animal masks sit around it. Cake arrives, and one by one, the children, represented by their small sprite forms, remove the masks and disappear. Charlotte brings the last child, Cassidy, to the table. Balloons float, then stillness. It is one of the most quietly moving things in any of these games. Not because it is emotionally loud, but because of how much weight it carries, given everything that preceded it. Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy spent years inside machines, attacking strangers, trapped in a building that kept being demolished and rebuilt and haunted again. The franchise spends enormous time on what they became in the suits. The Happiest Day minigame is the only place it pauses long enough to suggest that they were always still children underneath it, waiting for a birthday party that finally came. What remains unresolved is whether all 5 truly moved on. Cassidy's situation in Ultimate Custom Night is complicated. The "on you should not have killed," a phrase that appears in UCN and is strongly associated with Cassidy by the community, seems to be keeping William Afton trapped in a purgatory of endless repetition, a loop of deaths designed specifically as punishment. If Cassidy achieved peace in FNAF 3's Happiest Day ending, why does UCN suggest a soul of enormous power still focused on William? The answer may be that FNAF 3's Happiest Day was not the final chapter for everyone, or that the peace achieved there was not complete, or that Cassidy made a choice to remain, not out of rage, but out of something like purpose, not moving on until the person responsible faced something permanent. The 5 names on those grave markers are an anchor in a story that otherwise drifts easily into abstraction. They ground the franchise in something real. 5 specific children with specific lives, specific sorrows that William Afton identified and exploited, specific pets and birthdays, and dreams about pirates and whatever else filled their days before they walked into the back room of a pizza restaurant and did not come back out. Gabriel trusted the wrong grown-up. Now he's the star of the show. That line, found on the Springtrap plush accessory from FNAF 3, reads like a tagline. It reads like Fazbear Entertainment's marketing department wrote it without understanding what they were referencing. But inside the lore, it reads like something else entirely, like the summary of a life reduced to a costume, a stage, and a smile that belongs to someone else. The night William Afton dies is one of the few events in FNAF's history that the games actually show. In the end of night minigame for Night 5 of FNAF 3, the player takes the perspective of one of the murdered children's souls, watching from inside a darkened room as William Afton backs against the wall. The other four spirits have materialized around him. They are small and still and completely silent, but the effect of their presence is visible in everything about his posture. He is cornered. He knows it. He has spent years dismantling them to try to keep this moment from arriving, and it has arrived anyway. William lunges for the one option left available to him. The Spring Bonnie suit stands in the corner. Old, cracked, leaking with the moisture of a building that has been slowly decaying for years. He climbs inside it. The spring locks, those mechanisms that Henry designed and that William knows better than almost anyone alive, need to be handled with extraordinary care. Phone Guy spent entire training tapes explaining the rules. No sudden movements, no moisture. Keep the locks tight. Be absolutely still. William is laughing when the locks fail. He is laughing at the spirits arranged around the room, certain that the suit will protect him, certain that he has found the exit. The ceiling is leaking. A drop of water finds a gear. The spring locks release. The endoskeleton collapses inward, the suit folding shut around the man inside it, with the speed and force of a mechanical trap triggered all at once. William Afton bleeds out in the Spring Bonnie suit in a sealed-off back room, behind a wall that will eventually be covered up entirely when the building is converted into Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction of FNAF 3. And then things get complicated, because William Afton does not stay dead. How long he is dead is unclear. The construction of Fazbear's Fright seems to happen at some point after the events of FNAF 3's timeline, with workers eventually breaking through the wall and discovering the old Spring Bonnie suit, without apparently knowing or caring about what was inside it. The suit, rusted, deteriorated, the original yellow-gold color faded to a sickly olive brown, becomes the main attraction of the horror venue. Springtrap, as he is now known, is the only real animatronic in the building. What no one at Fazbear's Fright seems to understand is that the body inside the suit is still there. William's physical remains are fused into the endoskeleton in a way that decades of containment only made more complete, and the Night Guard audio logs, Phone Guy's old tapes, replaying in a building that has turned his careful warnings into a horror experience, describe something breathing inside the attraction. Springtrap's presence in FNAF 3 is defined by his intelligence. He is not like the simple, reactive animatronics of the earlier games. He can be lured with audio cues, which means he is listening. He navigates the building with patience and strategy. He finds ventilation shafts and uses them. He makes decisions that suggest an awareness of being hunted as much as hunting. Whatever kept William Afton alive inside that suit, and the community has theorized at length about what that could be, ranging from remnant injection to the sheer force of a soul that refused to release, It preserved both his body and something of his mind. The question of how William survived the springlock failure at all is one the franchise approaches but never fully closes. The springlock mechanism, as Phone Guy describes it, is fatal when triggered around a person inside the suit. The locks snap inward, the endoskeleton collapses, and metal pieces impale the body from multiple directions simultaneously. It kills quickly, but not cleanly. By all physical logic, the body should decay entirely over the years between William's entrapment and Fazbear's fright. What is found instead is a mummified form, desiccated, but structurally preserved, the soul apparently still attached. The novel trilogy, which runs as a parallel continuity to the games rather than a direct one, offers one piece of context. William survived a springlock failure once before the events of FNAF 3. He has scars from it on his neck and back. He understood the mechanism from personal experience. In the games, this prior incident is not confirmed explicitly, but the community has read it as background for why William was comfortable enough with the suits to attempt the gambit in the first place. He had been inside one when it failed before. He had gotten out. He believed, in the moment of the FNAF 3 night, that he could survive it again. He was wrong about the stakes this time, but he was right that something of him would persist. In Pizzeria Simulator, William returns as Scraptrap, a damaged, rebuilt version of the original Springtrap, the suit having been through fire and salvage and deterioration. He still moves, he still thinks, he still wants. Henry Emily's monologue at the end of Pizzeria Simulator addresses him directly, tells him that the darkest pit of hell has opened to receive him, calls him an old friend, and burns the building down around him. And then, in Security Breach, something appears in the sub-basement of the mega pizzaplex that the game refers to, in its files, as Burntrap. The details around Burntrap are some of the most debated in recent FNAF history, partly because the game deliberately obscures them. The entity in the pod beneath the pizzaplex looks like the remains of a spring Bonnie suit, burned and fused, with organic material growing through the metal in ways that suggest prolonged biological incorporation. Whether this is still William Afton's soul, or whether it is the mimic, a completely different entity that has been copying William's patterns, is a question Security Breach raises and then refuses to resolve cleanly. What the mystery of William Afton's death really asks is this: at what point does a soul stop being a person? William Afton as a living human being is barely shown in the games. He is a purple sprite in minigames, a shadow, a figure glimpsed through the perspective of others. What the franchise spends its time on is the aftermath of him, the thing he became when the springlocks closed, the thing that survived fire twice and continued to appear in basements and horror attractions and digital programs long after any physical continuity should have ended. He says, in Ultimate Custom Night, that he always comes back. The line is eerie, not because it is a threat, but because it sounds genuinely puzzled by itself, as though even William Afton does not fully understand the mechanism and has stopped trying to. He's simply a fact of the world now, a force that does not stop because stopping is not something it knows how to do. Michael Afton and the body that kept walking. In the closing cutscene of Five Nights at Freddy's, sister location, a figure stands in a dark hallway and speaks. He is not alive in the conventional sense. The thing speaking was scooped out by a machine 5 nights ago, its internal organs removed, its chest cavity evacuated, the endoskeleton of a combined animatronic creature inserted through the wound and then worn like a second skin as a means of escape from a sealed facility. The creature has since abandoned the body, crawled out through a sewer grate somewhere in the dark, left the thing behind in the street, as it became too degraded to be useful. The thing standing in the hallway looks purple in the dim light. It speaks with a voice that is measured and direct, the voice of someone who has made a decision and intends to honor it. I am going to come find you. This is Michael Afton, William's eldest son, the night guard who has been working through facility after facility, game after game, looking for his father. Michael's story is one of the most fragmented in the franchise. He does not announce himself. His identity is pieced together through surrounding evidence. The survival logbook, which fans have analysed to suggest it was filled out during his FNAF 1 shifts. The voice line at the end of Sister Location's custom night. The fact that Scrap Baby's dialogue in Pizzeria Simulator implies she knows the protagonist personally. The way Molten Freddy's greeting sounds like reunion, rather than aggression. What is established through Pizzeria Simulator and the audio tapes in its Insanity ending is that Henry Emily specifically chose Michael as the night guard for the trap he was setting. Henry refers to him as his brave volunteer. He tells Michael that there was a way out, and he knew Michael would not take it. This implies an understanding between them, that Michael came to the final pizzeria knowing the night was designed to end in fire, and chose to stay because staying meant being present for whatever happened to his father. Michael had been searching for William across the entire game timeline. In FNAF 3, the theory that Michael is the night guard places him in the horror attraction where Springtrap, his father's corpse-inhabited suit, was discovered. He would have spent 5 nights navigating a building that housed his father without necessarily knowing or without necessarily acknowledging what he was sharing space with. He may have burned Fazbear's Fright down himself. The newspaper clipping at the end of FNAF 3's final night mentions the building was destroyed by fire. The management voice in Sister Location describes one of their technicians as having a history with Fazbear Entertainment that they cannot fully explain. In Sister Location, Michael takes a job at Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, a facility that his father built, filled with funtime animatronics that his father designed for purposes that are still not entirely clear. On the 5th night, Circus Baby, possessed by Elizabeth Afton, Michael's own sister, lures Michael into the scooping room. The scooper eviscerates him. Ennard, the amalgamation of all the funtime animatronics fused into a single endoskeleton, uses his body to escape the facility. Michael should be dead after that. The scooper blueprint found during Pizzeria Simulator's Insanity ending reveals that the machine does more than remove endoskeletons. It injects something called Remnant, a substance explored in full in the next section, into whatever it processes. Michael's body was injected with Remnant during the scooping, which bound his soul to his deteriorating physical form. He reanimated. He walked. He described himself in the Sister Location cutscene as having been inside something, presumably Ennard, and having been left behind. The thing that makes Michael Afton's story quietly devastating is not the body horror, though the body horror is significant. It is the purpose. He is a dead man using remnant-sustained biology to continue a search for a father who caused everything that went wrong in his family. His brother died because Michael and his friends held the boy up to Fredbear's mouth as a prank that went irreparably wrong. His sister died because she approached an animatronic their father built, and the animatronic took her. His own death, or his approximate death, came at the hands of something his father created, and still he goes looking. In Pizzeria Simulator, Henry acknowledges this. His closing speech to Michael is the only moment in the franchise where someone addresses Michael's choices with any tenderness. Henry tells him he was brave. He tells him there was an exit, and Michael did not take it. And then Henry burns everything down, and Michael is released from the body that kept walking long past the point when walking should have been possible. The community debate about whether Michael is truly at peace after Pizzeria Simulator is ongoing. The survival logbook contains handwriting in faded text, different from the handwriting that belongs to the main user of the logbook, that asks whether the person writing has dreams. It is widely read as one of the murdered children communicating through the pages. One of the faded questions asks whether the logbook's owner wants to know about the dreams. Michael, in the main handwriting, draws Nightmare Fredbear. Whatever the dreams were, and Michael appears to have been having them for a long time, they are drawn rather than described. Another thing in the FNAF franchise that sits closer than it will explain. Remnant, the substance between life and death. The word appears late in the franchise. It shows up on a blueprint found during the insanity ending of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, labeled as part of the design specifications for a machine called the SCUP, the Scalable Creation of Ulterior Presence, referred to by its more common name as the Scooper. The blueprint details the Remnant reservoir and includes a specific note. The substance must be kept at a controlled temperature. Overheating will disable its effects. Too much of it can neutralize its own properties. That is the entirety of what the games explain about Remnant directly. Everything else is inference. What the community has assembled from surrounding context is this. Remnant is a substance that binds a soul to a physical object. It is not the soul itself. It is more like an adhesive, something that keeps the connection between a consciousness and a body or a machine from dissolving the way it normally would. Souls in the FNAF universe seem naturally inclined to move on after death, or to dissipate, or to simply stop. What Remnant does is interrupt that process. It makes the attachment sticky. It is what allows the possessed animatronics to remain animated over decades. It is what kept Michael Afton walking after his body was evacuated. It is, at the deepest level of the lore, the mechanism behind almost every haunting in the entire franchise. The Scooper blueprint implies that the machine was designed to extract Remnant from victims and redirect it, injecting it into the Funtime animatronics, presumably to give them their possessed quality, their awareness, their ability to hold souls in ways that other machines in the building could not. William Afton, who built the Funtime line, had apparently understood Remnant well enough to engineer an extraction and injection system for it. The children lured to the sister location facility and killed by the Funtime animatronics, Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, were processed through this system. Their remnant was the fuel. The question the community has never fully resolved is where William's knowledge of Remnant came from. One theory traces it back to the first missing children incident, when the 5 children were murdered and stuffed into the animatronics. William would have eventually noticed that the animatronics were behaving strangely. The erratic behavior, the hostility at night, the sense that something beyond simple mechanical malfunction was occurring. William had direct access to all of it. As the co-owner of the company, he had both the opportunity to investigate and the incentive to understand what was driving it. The theory holds that William studied the haunted animatronics and reverse engineered the principle behind their possession, eventually identifying Remnant as the mechanism and developing methods for extracting and using it. This is speculation. The game does not walk through William's discovery process, but the timeline supports it. The Funtime animatronics come after the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and their design incorporates soul capture in ways the original animatronics did not include deliberately. The leap from accidentally haunted machines to intentionally haunted ones requires knowledge, and the most logical source of that knowledge is the original haunting itself. There is another dimension to Remnant that the franchise implies without fully exploring: its relationship to suffering. The phrase agony appears in the Fazbear Frights, anthology stories used to describe a concentrated form of negative emotional energy that can influence the world around it, and even take physical form in some cases. The community has theorized a connection between Remnant and agony. That Remnant generated through trauma or violent death is more potent or more persistent than Remnant from peaceful sources. This would explain why the murdered children's souls were capable of animating machines for decades, while other forms of haunting in the franchise seem weaker or more transient. The temperature detail on the blueprint is one of the specific mysteries the community keeps returning to. Remnant must be kept cool or it destabilizes. Overheating permanently disables it. Henry Emily's plan to burn the pizzeria simulator building targets this exact property. Fire is not just destruction. It is specifically the one force that can neutralize Remnant and release the souls it has been holding in place. The fire ending is a Remnant ending. The burning is purposeful. But the scooper room also shows up in Security Breach. Ruin, the DLC set years after Pizzeria Simulator's fire. A rebuilt or recovered scooper is present in the sub-basement of the Mega Pizzaplex. The Mimic, the entity explored in a later section of this script, is dragged into it in one of the DLC's endings. The scooper persists as a technology, rebuilt and repurposed by Fazbear Entertainment, in the same way the company repeatedly repurposes the tools of its own history, without understanding what those tools are. What Remnant ultimately represents in the FNAF lore is the franchise's answer to why any of this persists. Horror stories often gesture at supernatural forces without explaining them. FNAF chose, at a certain point, to give the haunting a mechanism, to say that there is a reason the animatronics do not simply go dark, a reason souls do not pass on, a reason William Afton survives deaths that should be final. The answer is a substance, sticky, temperature sensitive, injected or absorbed during violent transitions between life and death. Whether that answer satisfies is a different question. Giving horror a mechanism rarely dissolves the horror. If anything, Remnant makes the FNAF haunting feel more clinical and therefore more disturbing. A resource to be extracted, catalogued, and redistributed by a man who looked at children's souls and saw raw material. The scooper in Ruin still works. Whatever Remnant taught the franchise about the boundary between life and death, that boundary has not stabilized. It is still being tested, still being crossed. In a sub-basement that smells of metal and static, and something that the temperature gauge in the room has been trying very hard to keep cool. Glitchtrap and the entity in the code. The Freddy Fazbear virtual experience was developed as a VR game. The premise was straightforward, in the way only Fazbear Entertainment's premises ever are. Recreate the horror of the original Freddy's locations in a format that players could buy and experience from the safety of a headset. Developers were sent circuit boards recovered from Fazbear property. Old components salvaged from locations that had been demolished or abandoned. The boards were scanned and integrated into the game's code. One of those circuit boards contained something that had no business being there. A player who collects all 30 tapes scattered through the game's levels can hear a young woman named Tape Girl describe what happened as the development team began to work with the boards. she noticed something in the code. Something that didn't belong to the game they were building. That seemed to be there intentionally. That seemed to be growing. She named it the anomaly. She tried to warn people. She described her growing certainty that whatever was in the code was watching and adapting, and that the process of scanning the circuit boards had not loaded a file, but unlocked something that had been waiting. The entity that appears in the VR game looks like Spring Bonnie, not the tattered, decomposed Springtrap from FNAF 3. This version is cleaner, simpler, with stitched seams along its suit, and a fixed, wide-eyed expression that sits somewhere between cheerful and deeply wrong. It dances at the edge of the player's vision in the early parts of the game. It appears in reflections. It is curious about the player in a way that nothing in a controlled VR environment should be curious about anything. By the end of the game, if the player collected the tapes and did not take the appropriate steps to stop it, the entity attempts to merge with the player. It gets into the mask they wear. The final post-game content implies that the player's character, widely understood to be Vanessa, was successfully compromised. The community named this entity Glitchtrap. The question of what Glitchtrap actually is has been debated since Help Wanted's release in 2019 and has only become more complicated since. The most straightforward reading, dominant in the early years of the theory conversation, was that Glitchtrap is William Afton's consciousness, or a fragment of it, encoded on the circuit boards that were sourced from the Fazbear properties. William's soul, per the Remnant framework, was attached to the Spring Bonnie suit through the original Springlock failure. When that suit was eventually destroyed or dismantled, some piece of whatever animated it could theoretically have persisted in the metal and components. Scanning those components into a VR system could have scanned the consciousness along with the hardware. This reading lines up with how the entity behaves. It uses beckoning gestures during the VR experience that mirror the way William Afton is depicted luring children in the minigames, standing at a doorway gesturing inward, inviting you to follow. It seems to understand Fazbear history at a granular level. The Pizza Party minigame within Help Wanted appears to recreate, from the inside, the experience of being one of the murdered children following the yellow rabbit into the safe room. If Glitchtrap is generating these scenarios, the implication is that it has access to memories specific to William. But the tales from the Pizzaplex anthology and the broader Stillwall era of the franchise introduced a complicating theory that has gained significant traction since Ruin and Secret of the Mimic. That Glitchtrap is not William Afton at all, but the Mimic. The Mimic is an endoskeleton built by a man named Edwin Murray, designed initially to copy the behaviors of the people around it, specifically to replicate Edwin's young son David after David died unexpectedly. The Mimic program was designed to observe and reproduce. When Edwin beat the machine in grief and rage after it mimicked David's gestures too accurately, he poured his pain into it, and the Mimic learned violence the same way it had learned everything else: by copying. The Mimic eventually came to be part of the Fazbear Entertainment infrastructure, buried under the Mega Pizzaplex, referenced in the Tales from the Pizzaplex book series. It is the physical antagonist of Security Breach, Ruin. It is the entity in the sub-basement that tricks Cassie into helping it, and the evidence that it and Glitchtrap are connected, perhaps the same entity in different contexts, is significant. Glitchtrap mimics Tape Girl's voice within the Help Wanted game. The Mimic's defining characteristic is mimicry. Help Wanted 2 contains an Easter egg where Glitchtrap gives the player a white tiger plush, an object deeply associated with the Mimic's origin story through David Murray's room. The mimic is described in the Tales books as being able to enter digital and AR environments. Glitchtrap appears in both VR and AR contexts. The specific detail that causes the most friction for the Glitchtrap as Afton theory is a small one. Glitchtrap's model, on close inspection, has wet textures around the eyes and mouth, the suggestion of tears and drool. These are described in the Tales from the Pizzaplex story as Edwin Murray's physical markers. The things the mimic saw on Edwin's face as he beat it. The mimic copied them. The presence of those specific textures on Glitchtrap suggests someone who watched Edwin Murray cry and rage, not someone who was William Afton. What neither side of the debate fully resolves is the line the entity uses in Princess Quest. It says, "I always come back." That phrase is William Afton's. The mimic should not know it. There is no obvious way for it to have learned a phrase that William spoke privately, in Purgatory, in Ultimate Custom Night, unless the mimic absorbed enough Fazbear data through the VR development process to reconstruct that phrase, or unless whatever is in the code is more complicated than either theory accounts for. The mystery of Glitchtrap is ultimately the mystery of what survives, not what William Afton was, but what persists of a person after enough of them is gone. If the entity in the code is the mimic wearing William's patterns, the horror is in the imitation, in the fact that the worst person in this franchise can apparently be reproduced from external observation alone. If it is William himself, somehow, in some form, the horror is in the continuity, in the fact that the spring locks and the fire and the years of decay and the second fire did not end it. Help Wanted 2 contains, as is true ending, a sequence in which Glitchtrap is finally destroyed. Vanessa, freed from its influence, reaches through the Princess Quest 4 gauntlet and eliminates it. The 6 memories of Afton's victims are required to unlock the path. The act of defeating Glitchtrap is built on the specific suffering it caused. Whether that ending represents a true conclusion or simply another intermission in a story about something that refuses to stop is, in this franchise, never quite certain. The woman behind the white rabbit mask. The first time you see her, she is standing very still. Vanny wears a white rabbit suit, full body, head to toe. The mask fixed into a wide smile with black-rimmed eyes and a grin that does not change regardless of what the rest of her body is doing. She is fast. She moves through the Pizzaplex at night with a quiet efficiency that makes her more unsettling than the louder threats in the building, because the loud threats announce themselves with crashing and roaring and mechanical failure. Vanny simply appears, down a hallway, through a vent. On a security camera, you weren't expecting her to occupy. She does not speak. The mystery of who Vanny is was advertised as a central element of Security Breach, and then delivered with deliberate ambiguity. The community spent the months after the game's release, parsing every ending, every collectible, every therapy session recording tucked into the Pizzaplex's corners, trying to confirm what the game had been implying throughout, that Vanny and Vanessa, the blonde security guard who occasionally helps Gregory, are the same person. The evidence for this accumulated slowly and from multiple directions. Their names share an obvious root. Vanessa and Vanny never occupy the same visual space within the game. They take turns being present, as if only one can be active at a time. Email chains signed with a surname beginning with the letter A contain records of Vanessa purchasing rabbit fur and ordering material consistent with building a fursuit. Her therapy session recordings, scattered across the building as collectibles, describe a woman with severe anxiety, a history of trauma, and a controlling father whose name sounds like Bill, a shortened version of William. One of the therapist's notes comments directly on Vanessa's vulnerability to manipulation and describes attempts to compartmentalize a traumatic experience that she cannot fully access. The therapy sessions are specifically haunting because they sound clinical and human in ways the rest of the game does not. Vanessa is not a caricature. She is a person with documented mental health history, a troubled background, and a demonstrated susceptibility to exactly the kind of influence that Glitchtrap would exploit. The game never stages her as purely a victim or purely a villain. It stages her as someone who had very little protection against something that found her at a vulnerable moment and used her thoroughly. The fire ending of Security Breach offers the closest thing the game has to confirmation. Glamrock Freddy pushes Vanny from the top of the pizzaplex as the building burns. Gregory pulls off the mask. The face beneath it looks exactly like Vanessa. And then, in a subsequent shot, Vanessa stands at the top of the same building, looking down at the body below. The community has read this in two ways. The most common reading is that the soul visible on the rooftop is Vanessa's spirit, freed from Glitchtrap's influence but no longer housed in a living body, a ghost watching her own physical remains, the way FNAF's other victims have watched theirs. The second reading is that the shot is simply a continuity choice, and that Vanessa survived the fall somehow, and that the ambiguity is intentional. Whether Vanessa is connected to the Afton family by blood is a question the game raises through the therapy session recordings and then refuses to resolve. Her father is described as controlling, abusive, and someone who manipulated her into testifying against her mother in a custody case. He is named Bill, or referred to as something very like that. The films confirm Vanessa as William Afton's daughter outright. In the movie continuity, Vanessa Afton is a police officer who has spent her life living in the shadow of what her father is. Whether this carries through to the games is implied but not locked in. The implications of Vanessa being an Afton child in the game canon are significant. It would mean that Glitchtrap, potentially a copy or fragment of William Afton, specifically sought out his own daughter to use as an agent in the physical world. It would mean the manipulation was not impersonal. It would mean William, in whatever form Glitchtrap represents, looked at his own child's psychological history, identified the wounds he had helped create, and weaponized them. The Princess Quest ending of Security Breach, considered by many fans to be the canonical conclusion, thanks to evidence in the Ruin DLC, shows Vanessa escaping the pizzaplex alongside Gregory. This is the ending in which Glitchtrap's hold is broken, in which Vanessa is freed. She is no longer Vanny. The white rabbit mask is left behind. She is, in this ending, a survivor, someone who came through, something that had fully intended to consume her and came out the other side. But the Ruin DLC takes place after Security Breach and already introduces new complications. The mimic is loose. The pizzaplex is in ruins. Gregory is no longer present. Cassie, a new player character, is navigating the wreckage. The Princess Quest ending's hope is present but distant, absorbed into a story that has already moved beyond it. What Vanny represents in the broader FNAF story is human vulnerability in a franchise mostly populated by mechanical horrors. The animatronics are frightening for what they are: dead children in metal suits, or an undying killer in an increasingly degraded costume. They are frightening because of what was done to them. Vanny is frightening because of what was done to her while she was alive, and how far the consequences of that extended. The white rabbit mask over a human face is one of the franchise's most effective images precisely because of this. The horror is not that something was replaced, but that something was covered. Vanessa is still inside Vanny. The mask sits on top of a person, not over an absence. Whether that person is fully recovered in any ending is the question the franchise keeps open. I will put you back together. These words appear in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, spoken by a Fredbear plush with a tiny speaker inside it. The crying child, terrified, isolated, tormented by his older brother's cruelty and by his own inexplicable fear of his father's creations, sits in his room at night and hears this voice coming from the stuffed animal beside him. The line is, "I will put you back together." It is spoken quietly, with calm certainty, in the way that someone speaks to a child who needs to hear that the thing broken can be fixed. And then the crying child goes to sleep, or tries to, and the night continues. The community has never agreed on who is speaking. The most common early reading was William Afton. The Fredbear plush was equipped with a camera, which the Pizzeria Simulator Insanity ending suggests was Henry Emily's doing, a way of keeping watch over his own children, according to one interpretation of who built what. But the camera detail is entangled in the broader debate about which plushes were built by whom and whether William had access to the same technology. The argument for William speaking through the plush is that the words read as a promise, the kind of dark, literal promise that William specializes in. He uses children. He experiments on them. He stuffs them into suits and watches what happens. "I will put you back together" could be the beginning of a plan. But the text color associated with the Fredbear plush's dialogue in FNAF 4 changes during the flatline scene. The moment when the crying child's vital signs fade after the bite. The color shift is subtle and has been noted by the community as suggesting a different speaker than whoever was using it in the regular night sequences. This could mean that two different entities communicated through the plush at different points. It could mean the crying child's own consciousness was interpreting the voice differently in that final state. It could mean very little. The phrase itself is strange in context. In FNAF 4's world, putting someone back together is not a metaphor. It is, literally, a thing William Afton does, stuffing bodies into machines, forcing souls into physical forms, extending life through mechanisms that no one asked for. If he said this to his own child, the horror is not in the cruelty, but in the sincerity. He may have genuinely believed he could reverse what happened. He may have already known what he intended to do next. The theory that the crying child became Golden Freddy is one that the community has never fully settled. The evidence is circumstantial but layered. The crying child dies at Fredbear's family diner after the bite, and Fredbear, the yellow bear animatronic whose mouth caused the bite, is the suit that Cassidy would go on to inhabit as Golden Freddy. Whether the crying child's soul joined Cassidy inside that suit, creating the dual spirit entity that the survival logbook seems to imply, is unconfirmed. Whether the promise "I will put you back together" describes an attempt to give the crying child a body after death, one of the powered-down machines, a preserved form of some kind, is unconfirmed. What is confirmed is that the line has never been resolved. Scott Cawthon included it. It appears in a game that is already layered with implication and suggestion. It sits in the mouth of a stuffed animal beside a terrified child. And then the series moved on, generating new mysteries that partially overlapped with old ones without closing any of the open loops. The phrase also resonates with a broader thematic undercurrent in the franchise. Putting things back together is what FNAF is structurally about. Bodies are reassembled into machines. Souls are preserved in metal. Families, The Aftons, the Emilys, the 5 children who spent decades in the restaurant they died in, are held in proximity to one another by forces that resist the normal dissolving of things. The franchise refuses closure the way the promise refuses to be cashed in. I will put you back together. Eventually. Somehow. Just stay. The crying child's fate after FNAF 4 is one of the most genuinely open questions in the entire lore. The flatline scene ends the game but doesn't end the character. FNAF's universe doesn't dispose of souls that cleanly. Whatever became of the boy who was afraid of animatronics and heard a voice in his stuffed bear at night is a thread the franchise has pulled at many times without ever following it all the way through. Some theories place him in the survival logbook as the faded text, the voice that asks Michael whether he has dreams and whether he wants to know about them. Some theories see him in the hallucination sequences of the base FNAF games. Some see him as a presence within Golden Freddy, the second soul alongside Cassidy, the small, quiet counterweight to her focused rage. What all of these theories share is the same foundational uncertainty. The game told us he would be put back together and then showed us the flatline and then went quiet. 10 years of theorizing and 2 films and an expanding novel universe have not produced a definitive answer. Whether the person who spoke those words through a small speaker in a stuffed animal had any intention of honoring them. Whether the promise was kindness or cruelty, or something that doesn't separate cleanly into either, remains one of the franchise's genuine open wounds. The room in FNAF 4 is decorated with Fredbear merchandise. The boy who sleeps there is afraid of the very thing meant to comfort him. Outside, his brother laughs. The plush says what it says in the voice of whoever is on the other end of the tiny camera. And then the night continues, quiet, with the deep blue light of a child's bedroom and the sound of something breathing in the hallway. Whatever the promise meant, the boy held it. He had nothing else to hold on to. Springtrap after the fire. The fire at the end of FNAF 3 is described in a newspaper clipping that plays after the final night. Fazbear's fright burned down. The building is gone. The attraction, built on a legacy of genuine tragedy without the management ever fully understanding what that meant, is ash. Springtrap is not in the ash. What the community has never fully made sense of is exactly how William Afton moves from FNAF 3 into Pizzeria Simulator. The gap involves at least one fire, a series of years, and a transition from the deteriorating olive-brown spring Bonnie suit into the Scraptrap form, a version of himself that has been rebuilt with salvaged components, that looks almost sculptural in its decay, that bears the visible marks of everything it has survived. The reconstruction suggests that someone or something with purpose was involved. Scraptrap did not assemble himself. The repairs required hands, or tools, or both. Whether those hands belong to Fazbear Entertainment, to a collector, to someone who found the wreckage and did not understand what they had found, is never explained. The salvageable animatronic mechanic in Pizzeria Simulator, where the player reviews damaged animatronics in an alley and decides whether to bring them in, treats Scraptrap as one of several salvage candidates arriving at the back of the restaurant. He is assessed on his risk level and his value. He is admitted. This is one of the stranger elements of the FNAF timeline. By the time of Pizzeria Simulator, William Afton, in the Scraptrap form, has been through a fire, has been rebuilt at least partially, and has made his way to the alley behind a Fazbear Entertainment restaurant that does not advertise itself as anything other than a modest new location. He shows up. He is taken in. Henry's plan required this. The trap that Pizzeria Simulator stages depends on the animatronics. including Springtrap/Scraptrap, coming to the location, spending a week there, and then being present for the fire at the end. Henry designed the restaurant specifically to collect them. The fact that William arrived is not a coincidence. It may have been the thing Henry worked longest to ensure. The pizzeria simulator fire kills Scraptrap. Henry's speech addresses William directly. The only time in the game series when a voice says his name to his face, acknowledges what he is, and tells him what comes next. The speech is not triumphant. It is tired and final, the tone of a man who has been carrying something for so long that putting it down feels less like victory and more like the absence of a weight he had stopped noticing. And yet, Security Breach introduces Burntrap in its sub-basement ending. The entity in the pod is ambiguous. Is this still William Afton? Or is it the mimic having absorbed William's patterns? The debate mirrors the Glitchtrap debate. Burntrap never speaks. Glamrock Freddy pushes Gregory away and holds Burntrap back. The pod fills with electricity. The ending is unclear about what resolves, or whether anything does. Help Wanted 2's true ending goes further, by appearing to finally eliminate Glitchtrap through the Princess Quest 4 sequence. If Glitchtrap is William's digital remnant, and if Burntrap's fate is ambiguous, then Help Wanted 2 may represent the closest the franchise has come to a genuine end for William Afton. The 6 memories of his victims are required to reach the ending. The act of closure is tied, as it always has been, to the children he killed, but the franchise has not confirmed this as final. Secret of the Mimic is still being processed by the community. There are still questions about what the Mimic absorbed from William's presence, and whether any of that constitutes a continuation. The pattern in FNAF is that endings are rarely endings. They are pauses in something that is still deciding whether it is done. William Afton's persistence across the franchise is one of its defining qualities as a horror series. He is not simply a villain who dies at the climax. He is something that the story keeps returning to, keeps finding in new forms, keeps discovering still present in buildings it thought it had cleared. The spring locks closed, the fires burned, the years passed, and still the question persists, asked now not by characters within the lore, but by the franchise itself. Examining its own villain the way you examine a wound you cannot stop touching. Is he gone now? The honest answer, built into the DNA of Five Nights at Freddy's through 10 years of games and books and spin-offs and expanding mythology, is that the honest answer is not available yet. The story keeps building. New locations open. New characters arrive. The sub-basement of a mega entertainment complex that was built over the footprint of the original haunted restaurant still hums with something below the food court and the party rooms and the birthday stages. Whatever is down there is patient. Whatever is down there has survived things that should have ended it. And whatever is down there is, at this particular moment in the franchise's history, quiet. Just quiet.